The evening was calm, and the little restaurant on the corner was filled with the smell of warm bread and grilled food. Families were gathered around tables, some laughing loudly, some speaking softly, and the sound of cutlery touching plates created a steady rhythm in the background. At the door, a mother carefully guided her daughter inside. The girl was in a wheelchair, her body thin and fragile, but her eyes carried a soft glow of innocence. She wore a simple blue dress, and her hair was tied neatly with a ribbon. Her mother leaned down and whispered something encouraging in her ear, making the girl smile for a brief moment before they slowly made their way to a small table near the window. The girl loved going out to eat. It was not something they could do often, but every time felt special to her. She liked the lights, the chatter, and the feeling of being part of the world outside her home. Her mother knew this and tried her best to make those moments happen whenever possible. Tonight was meant to be one of those rare and happy evenings. The girl's eyes sparkled as she looked at the menu, though she already knew what she wanted. She leaned toward her mother and whispered her choice, her voice quiet but full of excitement. Not far from them, a group of people sat at a long table, laughing louder than the rest. Their energy was sharp and careless, their laughter carrying across the restaurant. At first, they paid no attention to the new arrivals, but soon, one of them noticed the girl. He nudged the person beside him and tilted his head in her direction. The others followed his gaze. Within moments, smirks appeared on their faces. They exchanged whispers, and then the quiet whispers turned into mocking chuckles. The girl didn't notice at first. She was too busy staring at the dessert section of the menu. But her mother did. She tightened her jaw, pretending not to hear, hoping it would stop. But it didn't. The group grew louder. One of them leaned back in his chair and made a gesture as if pushing an invisible wheelchair, drawing laughter from his friends. Another placed his hand over his mouth and pretended to speak in a broken voice. The sound of their laughter cut through the air, cruel and sharp. The girl's smile began to fade. She glanced up, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want her mother to feel bad. So she lowered her gaze to her lap and tried to hide the change in her mood. Her mother placed her hand gently over her daughter's, whispering softly that she should ignore them. But inside, the mother's heart ached. She had seen this before, too many times. The world was not always kind, and some people seemed to enjoy making others feel small. She hated that her daughter had to endure it. She wanted to shield her from every unkind word, every mocking glance. But she also knew she couldn't fight everyone. So she squeezed her daughter's hand tighter, her eyes filling with silent frustration. The waiter arrived, placing 2 glasses of water on the table with a polite smile. He didn't seem to notice what was happening. The girl tried to focus on him, tried to act normal. She lifted her head, took a breath, and whispered her order. Her words were soft and careful. But before the waiter could write it down, one of the mockers at the other table repeated her words in a twisted tone, exaggerating each syllable. The others burst into laughter again, louder this time. The girl froze. The waiter shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, choosing instead to walk away quickly after taking the order. The mother's eyes burned with anger now, though she kept her voice steady. She leaned close to her daughter and told her she was brave, that she should not let those voices take away her happiness. The girl nodded, but her face was red, her lips pressed tightly together. She stared at her glass of water as if it could hide her from the world. Around them, other diners noticed what was happening. Some looked away, pretending not to see. Some whispered quietly to each other, but no one stood up or spoke against the cruelty. The silence of the room, the lack of support, felt heavier than the laughter itself. The girl's appetite disappeared. She had been so excited to eat her favorite dish, but now the thought of food made her stomach twist. She wanted to leave. She wanted to be anywhere but there. But at the same time, She didn't want her mother to feel disappointed. So she stayed, holding back tears, trying her best to look normal. Her mother reached into her bag, pulling out a napkin and pretending to fix something on the table, just to distract her child from the stares and laughter coming from across the room. Minutes felt like hours. The group showed no sign of stopping. Every so often, they looked at the girl again, their laughter filling the restaurant like an ugly song. The mother whispered again, telling her daughter to hold on, telling her she was proud of her. But she knew that inside, the girl was breaking piece by piece. The atmosphere in the restaurant changed. What was once filled with cheerful noise now felt tense. Conversations at nearby tables grew quieter, as though people were trying to block out the cruel laughter without getting involved. The staff moved quickly, focusing on their tasks, avoiding the growing tension. The girl could feel every eye in the room on her, even though many were not looking directly at her. It was as if the whole restaurant knew, but no one wanted to step forward. Her small hands trembled slightly on the table. She tried to lift her water glass but set it back down, afraid of dropping it. Her mother noticed and quickly covered her daughter's hands with her own again. She whispered that everything would be all right, though she wasn't sure how. In her heart, she prayed for the night to change, for anything to break the cruelty that hung over them. The door to the restaurant opened again, letting in a breeze from the street outside. The sound of laughter at the mocking table continued, and the girl kept her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, waiting for her food that no longer mattered to her. She didn't know that something unexpected was about to happen, something that would change the way she remembered this night forever. The group of loud diners seemed to feed off one another's cruelty. Each time one of them said something rude, the others laughed even louder, making the small restaurant feel less like a safe place and more like a stage for their mean jokes. They had their drinks in front of them, glasses half empty, and the more they sipped, the more their courage to mock grew. It was as if they enjoyed the silence of the other diners, mistaking it for approval. No one spoke up, and so they carried on, their voices echoing across the room. The girl sat quietly in her chair, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, tracing patterns with her finger. She wanted to disappear. Her mother leaned in, speaking in a gentle voice, trying to distract her. She told her about the dessert they would share later, about the flowers blooming outside the window, about anything that might make her child forget the harsh words from across the room. The girl nodded faintly, but her small shoulders still trembled. Her appetite was gone, and even the thought of her favorite sweet dish no longer brought her joy. At the other table, one man leaned back and stretched his arms as if he owned the whole place. He pretended to roll an invisible wheelchair, pushing it with exaggerated motions, his friends roaring with laughter. Another man covered his mouth and spoke in a broken, childish tone, repeating words the girl had said earlier when she placed her order. They laughed so hard that one of them slapped the table, spilling his drink slightly. Their behavior pulled attention away from conversations at nearby tables, and now nearly everyone in the restaurant knew what was happening. The tension was thick, but still, no one spoke up. The waiter returned with food for the mother and her daughter. He placed the plates down with a quick glance at them both, his face showing that he had noticed what was happening but felt powerless to stop it. He gave the girl a small smile, but it wasn't enough to hide his unease. The girl picked up her fork and tried to take a bite, but the laughter from across the room grew louder again. She set her fork back down, pushing her plate slightly away. Her stomach twisted with embarrassment. Her mother whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart, you don't have to eat right now. Just sit with me." She brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face, forcing a smile she didn't feel. She wanted to comfort her, but deep inside she felt her own anger boiling. Still, she didn't want to create a scene. She had been in situations before where standing up for her daughter led to even harsher stares. Tonight, she prayed for patience, but it was growing harder to keep. The group wasn't satisfied with only mocking quietly. They started speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. One man said, "Maybe we should get her autograph. She looks like she's famous or something." The others burst into laughter again. Another added, "She should be on TV, everyone loves a comedy show." Their words carried across the entire restaurant, and the sound of their cruel humor filled every corner. The girl's face turned red. She wanted to cry, but she didn't want her mother to see her tears. She bit her lip and looked down, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her. Her mother gently squeezed her hand under the table, whispering once more that she was brave. The girl nodded, but the sting in her heart remained. She wondered why people found joy in making fun of someone who had never done anything to hurt them. She wondered why the world allowed it. At a nearby table, a couple whispered quietly to one another. The woman frowned, clearly upset, but her partner shook his head as if telling her to stay quiet. A family with children looked away, pretending to focus on their own meal. One or two people glanced toward the group of mockers with disapproval, but their eyes quickly dropped when met with glares. Fear of conflict held everyone in silence, and that silence felt heavier than the mocking voices. The restaurant owner, a man in his 50s, came out from the kitchen carrying a tray. He paused for a moment, glancing toward the noisy table. He frowned but then continued walking, placing the tray down at another table before returning to the back. He didn't want to upset paying customers, even though their behavior was disturbing everyone else. The mother noticed this and felt a wave of frustration. How could so many people see the cruelty yet choose to remain silent? The girl tried again to pick up her fork, wanting to show her mother she was okay. She lifted a small bite toward her lips, but before she could eat, the group at the other table began to mimic her again. One man held his fork clumsily and made exaggerated chewing noises. The laughter that followed was louder than before. The fork slipped from the girl's fingers and clattered onto the plate. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, embarrassed even to cry. Her mother leaned closer, her voice steady but firm now. "Don't listen to them, my love. You are worth more than their words. They don't matter." But even as she said it, her chest ached with pain. She wanted to stand up, to shout at the group, to protect her daughter. Yet she stayed seated, hoping for the moment to pass. She told herself not to make the night worse. The noise at the mocking table grew to the point that even the people at the far side of the restaurant could hear. The group of bullies seemed to be enjoying the attention, enjoying the discomfort of others, as if it made them powerful. Their laughter echoed against the walls, bouncing back like a cruel reminder that sometimes the world could be harsh and unkind. The girl whispered to her mother, "Can we go home?" Her voice was so soft that it was almost lost beneath the sound of the mockers. Her mother's heart broke at those words. This dinner had been meant to be a happy moment, a rare treat, but it had turned into something painful. She was about to nod, about to suggest they leave, when something unexpected happened. The bell above the restaurant door jingled again. The sound was small, but it cut through the laughter for just a second. The cold air from outside slipped into the room as the door closed. Heads turned toward the entrance, and the room seemed to shift in mood. A tall man stepped in, his heavy boots making a steady sound on the floor. He wore a black leather vest covered with patches, and the word across the back made several people look twice. He was a Hell's Angel, a biker whose very presence seemed to demand attention. His beard was thick, his arms covered in tattoos, and his steps were slow but firm. He, the man who had just walked into the restaurant, did not rush. His steps were steady, each one echoing faintly against the wooden floor. The leather vest he wore carried patches that told stories of long roads and dangerous journeys. His boots were worn but strong, and the tattoos on his arms looked like a map of his life. Some people in the restaurant lowered their voices as they noticed him, while others turned their heads quickly as if pretending they had not seen him. But there was no ignoring his presence. He carried with him an air that made the atmosphere shift in an instant. The group of men at the noisy table went quiet for a moment. They had been laughing and mocking without a care, but now their smirks froze as they studied the man who had entered. One of them leaned slightly toward another, whispering something with a nervous grin, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. The leather vest bore a name that was known even by those who had never met a biker in their life. It carried weight. It carried fear and respect at the same time. The biker's gaze slowly moved around the room. He didn't speak right away. His eyes scanned from one table to the next, briefly pausing on families, couples, and individuals who were all watching him out of the corners of their eyes. Then his gaze landed on the little girl sitting in her wheelchair near the window. She was sitting small and quiet, her plate untouched, her mother's hand resting on hers. For a second, his stern face softened. He noticed the redness in the girl's cheeks, the way her shoulders curled as if she was trying to hide, the way her mother's protective hand trembled slightly. Then he looked past them toward the group of mockers. His face hardened again, his jaw tightening, and the energy in the room grew even heavier. Without breaking his stride, he began to walk toward their table. His boots hit the floor with a rhythm that seemed to fill the silence. The laughter at the table had completely stopped now. The men who had been bold just moments before shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them straightened his back as if to appear confident, but his hand tapped nervously on his glass. The little girl noticed the man too. She looked up, her eyes wide, unsure of what to think. She had seen people look at her with pity, with judgment, with curiosity. But this man's expression was different. It wasn't pity. It was something stronger, something protective. She didn't know who he was, but in that moment, she felt that his arrival meant something was about to change. The biker stopped right beside her table. He didn't look at the girl at first. He looked directly at the men who had been mocking her. His eyes were steady, unblinking, and his silence alone seemed louder than their earlier laughter. The group exchanged glances, their smirks slowly fading. The man who had been pretending to roll an invisible wheelchair lowered his hands and sat stiffly. Another coughed into his fist, avoiding the biker's gaze. Finally, the biker turned slightly and looked down at the girl. His expression softened again, and he leaned a little closer so only she and her mother could hear his first words. His voice was deep, roughened by years on the road, but it carried a kindness that surprised her. He said, "Don't ever let anyone make you drop your head. You are stronger than all of them put together." His words were simple, but they carried weight, sinking deep into her heart. For the first time that evening, she lifted her head. Her mother blinked, stunned. She could see her daughter's eyes brighten, though tears still rested at the corners. She whispered a thank you, her voice trembling with emotion. The biker gave a small nod before finally turning his full attention back to the group of mockers. The room was silent now, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding. The biker's stance was calm but unshakable. He crossed his arms slowly, his tattoos shifting as his muscles tightened. His voice carried across the restaurant as he spoke to the men. "You think it's funny to mock someone who has more courage than you'll ever understand? Say one more word. I dare you." His tone was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. The men at the table shifted again. One of them tried to laugh it off, raising his hands as if to say it was all a joke. "Hey, man, we were just playing around. No harm done." His smile was weak, his eyes darting nervously. But the biker didn't smile back. He simply stared, his silence more powerful than any words. Another man muttered, "Come on, let's just eat," pushing his plate away as if suddenly losing his appetite. Their earlier confidence had drained away completely, leaving only discomfort. They could feel the weight of the room pressing against them, not just from the biker's presence but from the silence of every other diner who was now watching. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, but for the first time that night, it wasn't from fear. She felt a strange sense of safety, as though this stranger had created a shield around her without even touching her. She dared to glance at the group that had mocked her, and for the first time, they weren't laughing. They weren't smirking. They looked small, almost embarrassed, under the biker's gaze. The mother reached for her daughter's hand again, but this time it wasn't trembling. There was strength in her grip now, strength she borrowed from the man standing over them. She whispered, "See, sweetheart. You're not alone." The biker finally pulled a chair from the table, not at the bully's side. The biker sat at the table beside the girl, his heavy frame making the chair creak slightly as he settled in. He didn't look at the group of mockers anymore. For him, they had already been dealt with by